Okay, the thing is, we're here to talk about an amazing movie, Synecdoche, New York. And I've got to tell you, I was just, the title alone for me was great. When I was in grad school, we studied the difference between synecdoche and metonymy and all that kind of stuff. The fact that you would have the nerve to put that in a title, just like you have the nerve to put an Alexander Pope line as a title for your last movie. Tell me about the decision to use that as a title, before we even get into what the movie is about.
I mean, I think I've always sort of recognized the parallel sounds between Schenectady and Synecdoche, so it appealed to me as an idea. And then as I was thinking of titles for the movie, it seemed to make a lot of sense. My feeling about titles is that if the movie is well received, then the title becomes good. I just think that's true. If you think about really great movies, the titles are meaningless. They are just the titles, you know, and so I wasn't worried about it, and I got a lot of concern from people whether or not people would know what it means or be able to pronounce it, and I figured, well, you know, the worst that could happen is people will learn a new word.
Exactly. Or they think you're just mispronouncing the city.
I get that a lot.
Yeah, well, you do, yeah.
There's actually this point where you tell people the name of the movie, and they feel, you can see that they're embarrassed for you because you don't know how to say Schenectady, and then you have to kind of quickly explain to them that
literally, I was on one of our talk shows here, that literally happened to me, where the host corrected me apologetically, and I had to apologize for correcting his correction. So, yeah, I get that completely. One of the great things about your movies is they're almost impossible to describe. I was wondering, I'm going to throw the ball to you. How would you describe?
You set me up and then asked me to describe
exactly. How did you pitch this movie, and how would you describe it to someone who hasn't seen it but needs to see it?
I mean, I don't pitch. I don't try to sell it, I guess, and so that's the issue. Is like, I mean, to me, the movie is about a man's life from about the age 40 to the age 90, dealing with the issues that he's dealing with, which are trying to find meaning, illness, relationship problems, the fear of death, regrets, and it just follows him through that. In the course of that, the movie kind of is expressed in the form of a dream. There's a lot of dream imagery and dream logic to the story, and he mounts a play. He's the theater director, and he mounts a play which gets bigger and bigger until he works on it for decades, until finally he's built an entire full-sized replica of New York City in a warehouse, populated it with thousands of actors playing people in the city, and hired people to play himself and the people he has relationships with, and that's it.
You think that's enough? Don't you think you should have put more on your plate? I mean, basically,
there is more. I'm just trying to condense it here. I mean,
no, I just mean in terms of your ambition. Yeah. I mean, you're dealing with everything. And again, it's interesting. You said sort of starts with the guy in midlife. I mean, he's 40.
Yeah.
He is full of regret. He's full of longing. He's full of loneliness. He's full of sadness. And he uses his art as a way to, I don't know how. I think it's fascinating the way he sort of projects his entire life and lives out his life and multiple lives in this artwork. And I wanted to ask you, since this is so clearly everything you do seems embarrassingly, obviously autobiographical, that the question is the art that he creates, is this entire world, because basically he creates the universe in his warehouse populated with every fashion of humankind and emotions and all. Is that creation of art an escape from his own reality, or is it an entrance into his reality?
I think he's trying to make it an entrance into his reality. I think it isn't separate from his life. It is his life. He is an artist, and he's trying to create art, which is part of his life. I don't think he understands exactly how to do it. I think he's trying to do something that's truthful, and he confuses literal truth with actual truth. And so he doesn't really, I don't think, ever get past that.
Yeah. And so I was going to say, every movie, at least every traditional movie, which obviously yours are not, every traditional movie, there's a narrative arc. The character starts in one place and he ends in another place, and you hope that it's a better place. Is there a narrative arc for Philip Seymour Hoffman's character?
Not in a large way, but I think that there's a truth to that. I think that those narrative arcs are not, they don't exist in the real world,
Yeah.
For most people. And I think it's interesting, when I meet a very old person who is very petty and angry and bitter, I feel this intense sadness because I want there to be that arc. I want them to be old and wise, but the fact is that people are people, and they go through, they have maybe moments of epiphany that are small, and there are moments like that in this movie, but they don't last, and they have to be worked on, and you just kind of find yourself back to being who you are, unless you are a very spectacular person. So I think that the conventional wisdom is that you have to have this in a character, but I'm not interested in doing that.
One of the problems about an interview, one of the problems that you present to an interviewer is there are millions of things you want to talk about in your movie, because you just sort of drop these little, golden bombs throughout your film, and that they never resolve themselves in any grand way, but they are so winning. One of the things I want to ask you about, the idea of doing Death of a Salesman with young people and that kind of reverberation, is that something that you ever have done in real life or would do? And where does that come from? Because I thought that was a brilliant notion, because in a lot of ways that reverberates throughout the movie completely.
Yeah, I mean, it reverberates even in the way that at the end of the movie, it takes you out of the movie when you realize that Philip Seymour Hoffman is actually a young person with a lot of prosthetic makeup on, playing an old person, but he will be an old person someday, and then you have to sort of take that seriously. Even you can't just say, well, he's wearing makeup. He will be. I think what happened was, I've seen those productions, those high school productions of Death of a Salesman, and there is that complete disconnect where the kids who are playing these parts have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking to me. I mean, it's very emotional. It's very moving in that they don't know.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to give Caden's character something sort of different to do with that play, and I thought of this, and then it appealed to me, and it allowed me to cast Michelle Williams in the play, because she's obviously a young woman, and so there were a bunch of reasons.
And I love the fact that you consider it heartbreaking instead of just funny as hell.
It's both.
Exactly.
I mean, things that are funny are heartbreaking at the same time, if they're really good, if they're really right.
Again, a million topics I want to talk about. Let's talk about humor in Charlie Kaufman. How do you think of humor? Do you have a sort of a black humor streak in you? I mean, how would you describe your humor or the humor in your films?
I think it's fairly humanistic. I don't think it's cynical, or I wouldn't even describe it as black. I mean, I look at it as situational. I try to find the humor that organically comes from these moments, and I think I've moved more and more in that direction through my work and later work.
That's really, I mean, one of the things that you've got. I just in terms of writing down various sort of summations. For somebody who is so off the charts in terms of a typical narrative, you've got a lot of little axioms of life. One of the things you wrote down, you realize you're not special. Everyone is everyone. And that, to me, that's like the humanistic manifesto, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think that is sort of what Caden is taught, sort of, at least by Millicent at the end of the movie. I mean, his life story is basically replaced by somebody else's life story who may or may not exist. And he lives with regret and sadness for her life, for Ellen's life, and I think that at the end of the movie, that is sort of the idea that there is a connection. We are all on the same continuum. We are born. We do move through life with our sadnesses. We do die, and that's something we share as people.
Yeah, and laughing while we head to the grave, or not?
Yeah,
sometimes.
Depends on my mood.
Yeah, that's all right. A number of questions I'd like to also sort of throw at you. There's early on in the movie, before it kind of goes into Charlie Kaufman territory, you have this very realistic kind of a breakdown of a relationship with Catherine Keener and Philip Seymour Hoffman. And she utters this great line, which is that the more you know somebody, you're bound to be disappointed. The more you know about somebody, the more disappointed you will be in somebody. Do you think is that a clarion call for all of us, or is that a position that you want to counter, since Caden is so upset with Keener for uttering that?
I think I just like to start conversations. I mean, I think that there's a truth to that. I mean, I think that we do project, especially early on in relationships, onto the person we love. We project a lot of qualities that eventually we realize they're people.
Yeah.
And we have to then learn to accept them as people or not. Basically leave and do it again with somebody else until that goes bad, and I think that I don't have any prescription. It's just something I like to think about.
One of the sort of almost chants that Philip Seymour Hoffman's character Caden says is that, "I'm afraid to die." Are you afraid to die, Charlie Kaufman?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I sometimes I am. Yeah, it's a very mysterious thing, and it's kind of, I guess it's impossible to know what it means until it happens, and then maybe you do know and maybe you don't know. But I've been more afraid of death at other points in my life, but I've been afraid of death probably since I was a little kid. I used to worry about it.
And do you dread growing old? I mean,
it's not my favorite thing.
Here.
Yeah, it's scary, and it's scary for a lot of reasons, and a lot of reasons are expressed in this movie. The sort of the body falling apart, and the sort of sense of being marginalized by society, getting closer to death, dealing with protracted illness, and and loss of people in your life that you love. I mean, all that stuff. Yeah, it is scary.
I love this idea, the whole simulacrum idea of recreating a life outside yourself. It reminds me of in Tristram Shandy, the Toby character. He recreates the battles of France because he had a war injury there. Do you have any? Is there any kind of personal recreation that you have? I mean, do you have like a little movie set in your corner of your apartment or wherever you live to recreate the moments of your life?
No, I don't have that. But from a very early age, I've always loved sets. I've always loved theater sets and movie sets. The idea that there's a fake reality that's so perfectly executed that down to the fingerprints near the light switch.
Yeah.
The idea that, you know, I went to plays when I was a kid in New York and there'd be some tenement apartment on stage and you knew that some craft person had put those fingerprints there. And I don't know why, but it just thrills me. It's like my favorite thing in the world. So I've never quite done it, but I do love it.
And in terms of theater, do you do much theater work, or are you strictly cinematic?
I did as a kid, and then I did a couple of plays last year. I wrote and directed a couple of plays before I did this, and so that's my first, you know, re-entry back into theater, which I really enjoyed. I'd love to do more of it.
Yeah. Can you talk about the difference for you between the cinema and theater in terms of how you project? Can you imagine, I mean, to do this play, it'd be hard to do this on stage, for instance, what you managed to pull off here. Do you think that there's something freeing about cinema that, you know, theater can't match and vice versa? Or do you see is there a tussle between the two for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways theater wins because theater is alive and film is pre-recorded and you can't change it. And theater is always changing based on what's going on at the moment with those actors, interaction with the audience. There can be mistakes that can lead to exciting things. You can't do that with a film. But yes, you can, with special effects, create these enormous illusions in movies, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah. I have to reference another just fun bit in the movie. A woman buys a house literally on fire, and she goes through the house, and the house is continually on fire. You want to explain that metaphorically, or is it just a great sort of philosophic gag?
I mean, I could explain what I think it means, but I'm not sure that I want to. I like to leave things for people to interact with, but there's something it means to me.
Yeah.
I will say that she says later in the movie, the character who buys this house says that the end is built into the beginning, and I think that there is a choice that she made by moving into this house that determines her death. Really.
Yes.
And that was not unintentional.
Excellent. And is that an encouraging or discouraging notion that the end is built into the beginning?
It's neither. It's just the truth. You know, it's just something to know that you are by being born, you are going to die, basically, and everything and every choice that you make reverberates. Which another character says actually in the movie, that reverberates throughout the rest of your life.
How is it you directed this film? How is directing a Charlie Kaufman script?
Well, you know, since I am Charlie Kaufman, I guess I feel like I understood what I was trying to do, and so it gave me some sort of authority in directing it that I might not have had experientially.
You weren't pulling out your hair. My God, what's he thinking?
No, I wasn't actually,
right.
and actually most directors that I've worked with haven't done that either. But you know. It was more, how do we afford this? That was the big issue, and which is not something I'd ever had to concern myself with before.
And I have to ask you, because this seems as far away from your world as possible, but in the movie, he wins a MacArthur grant, a Genius grant, and yet it's almost like tossed off, like, oh, well, you know, I mean, it does allow him to, you know, explore, but how do you feel about the idea of awards? I mean, you yourself are now an Oscar winner, and you will always be in your obituary, as they say, it'll be referenced. How do you feel about? Do you have kind of an equivocal reaction to the world of awards and that, or do you embrace it lovingly?
I mean, being in the business and being sort of part of that award thing on a few movies, I've sort of learned what it's really about, and it's a very political marketing type of situation. People put a lot of money into trying to win those awards, and so you can't really take them all that seriously. And you know, certainly if you lose, then you can't. You know, you don't, and you feel like you weren't justified in losing. Then you can't take it too seriously when you win. But you know, that being said, it's nice to have that trophy. I mean, it's a cool trophy, and you know, people, you know, want to see it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
You'll
good.
take it.
I took it.
Yeah, very good. Okay, I think I'm afraid we have to wrap this up. I know you have to get to the airport, but do you have, after Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it felt like where everyone wonders, is he going to run out of things to do? I mean, you're so self-reflexive, you're so postmodern in the most positive sense. Is there an internal dynamic to your films, to your screenplays, that the end is built into your beginning? Do you think that you're going to run out of material that you can then turn into and create a Charlie Kaufman universe, or do you feel like, oh my God, it's like I'm never going to have anything, I'm never going to run out of things to say?
I think when Caden is creating this play that goes on for decades, the reason it can never end is because he's constantly changing. He's getting older. He's having different experiences, and he's trying to include all that. Everybody is the same. I mean, my life is different now than it was 5 years ago when I started this. I have different things that I'm thinking about. I will write about those things. I mean, it will end when I die. It may not be easy to pull out new ideas, but I'm confident that there are new things that I'm thinking about.
So you're not stranding about, oh my God, now what do I do? I mean, how do I top this? Do you feel like...
I don't want to top it. I'm not interested in topping it. I just want to get closer. My goal is to get closer to being honest. I think it's a very hard thing to be honest. I'm trying that. I'm trying to do that in my work, and each time I work, I try to get closer to that, my understanding of it as a subjective human being, what that means, and that's an ongoing process, and I feel like, it'll die when I die.
And from now on, will you direct all of your future scripts?
I'd like to direct the next one. I can't say from now on what will happen, but if they allow me to, I will direct the next thing I write.
I can't wait to see it. Again, great interview. I could talk to you all day. Fantastic. Okay.